Most people consume content about growth and never actually grow. They read the posts, they watch the videos, they collect the motivation, and then go back to the same life. The same patterns, same excuses, same version of themselves. And this isn't it. The MindForge podcast exists for people who are serious about the mental work, the discipline, the identity, the hard internal stuff that nobody talks about honestly. And this podcast exists to go even deeper. Every episode, we take what's on the page and we crack it open. The stories behind it, the science underneath it, the application you can actually use. If you're looking for hype, you're in the wrong place. If you're looking to be challenged, to think harder, to leave every episode a little more clear on who you're becoming and what it's going to take, you're exactly where you need to be. I'm Caden Floyd. This is MindForge Podcast, brought to you by WarriorX Training. Let's get to work. There was a night that I drove home and sat in my driveway for probably almost an hour. I didn't go inside. I just sat there because I knew that the person who walked out of the house that morning was not the same person sitting in that car. And I didn't know how to reconcile that yet. But that's the cost that nobody warns you about. Not the hard work, not the uncertainty of building something from nothing, not the nights that you're staring at a screen wondering if any of it's actually going to matter. I mean the deeper cost, the one that comes after you've already decided you want to build something real, something that actually impacts people. The cost of changing yourself in the process. Because here's what I've learned. You cannot build something meaningful without becoming someone different. The business, the mission, the thing that you're trying to create, it will require a version of you that does not exist yet. And that gap between who you are now and who the work is asking you to become, that's where most people quietly give up. Not because they stop caring, but because nobody told them the becoming was part of the job. And I don't think that I'm alone in this at all. Because if you're building something, maybe it's a brand, maybe it's a business, but it's a life that actually means something to you, you've felt this too. The moment that you walk into a room and feel the pull to shrink back into who you were before you started. The conversation where you go quiet when you should have spoken up. The day that you catch yourself performing the old version of you because it's easier than defending the new one. And honestly, that's not a discipline problem. That's the cost of becoming. So this episode is not going to be a recap. It isn't for motivation. It's about the part of the process that doesn't make it onto the highlight reel. What it really costs to build something that matters, and what to do when the old version of your life tries to pull you back in. So with that said, the first lesson is building something real will always ask more of you than you expected. If you are waiting for it to feel easy before you commit, you'll probably never commit at all. So before I go any further, I want to be clear about where I'm talking from. Because I'm not trying to sound polished. I'm not trying to act like I have it all figured out. I'm trying to keep a record of the process while it is still happening. WarriorX is less than a year old. I'm 24 years old right now. And I am in the middle of building something while also trying to become the kind of person who can carry it. And that is where the tension lives. Because entrepreneurship sounds inspiring from the outside, and it can be. It's awesome. I love it. But from the inside, it means that showing up when nobody is handing you a blueprint. It means making decisions when you don't have full clarity. It means dealing with doubt and pressure and silence and temptation to go back to something easier. And a lot of people think that the hard part is starting. Sometimes it can be. But a lot of times, the harder part is staying in it long enough to become the person the mission requires. So lesson 2, the work will expose you. It will show you where you are still insecure, still impatient, and still craving control. That exposure is not failure. It is feedback. So when golf ended for me, I kind of tapped into this last episode. The only path that I had ever known was that. And the identity I'd built everything around since I was 6 years old was gone. And honestly, I didn't handle it well. I didn't face it at all. I completely checked out. And I got into things that numbed the noise, and I stayed there longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know any better, but because I feel like knowing better and choosing better are two completely different things when you're in that mental place. But that season taught me something I didn't want to learn at first. And the lesson is that if you don't deal with the loss of one identity, you will keep living like the old version of you still has a claim on your life. So the lesson with inside that story is that a closed chapter does not automatically mean that you've emotionally moved on from it. If you skip that part, it will keep shaping your decisions in the background. And that connects directly back to episode 3, like I said, where we talked about identity being the blade. But you can't sharpen a new identity if you are gripping onto the old one. But that's the work that nobody sees. That's what this journal, this podcast, and blog are really about. It's not just documenting building a business, but it's documenting a becoming. So here's what the real cost looks like in practice. I'm going to give some examples. It shows up when you realize that the people around you still know the old version of you. It shows up when you feel pressure to shrink so other people stay comfortable. It shows up when you're building something and nobody sees all the hours, the uncertainty, or the mental weight that comes with it. And it shows up in small ways too. Maybe it looks like you hesitating before speaking. Maybe you overthink simple decisions, and you wonder if you're moving fast enough because you compare your progress to everybody else's highlight reel. And that's part of becoming too. Not the glamorous part, but the real part. So the lesson here is that if you are trying to build something meaningful, you cannot let comfort become your standard. Comfort will keep asking you to stay familiar, but familiar is not the same thing as right. And the reason that this happens, and this is what episode 1 was really laying the groundwork for, is that the old version of you always wants to stay in charge when something new is being built or presented. The struggle is not just physical. It's the friction between who you were and who you're becoming. The fire from week 1 shows up here, not in the gym, but in the rooms, in the conversations, and in the moments where you feel the pull to go quiet. Now, episode 2 gave you your hammer, discipline over motivation. This is where you need it the most. Not to hit a new personal record in the gym, but to stay yourself, to stay firm on what you believe when the environment wants the old version of you back. And episode 3 gave you your blade, which is your identity. So when you walk into a room that expects the old version of you, you already know who you are. The question is whether you're willing to show up as that person. And this is why I keep coming back to this question. This is something that I asked myself when I was in that really dark place, is would the future version of me be proud of how I'm showing up right now? That question matters because it pulls you out of emotion and back into direction. So one of the most useful things that I've learned as someone building a business, Warrior X, but also as a coach, is how to watch myself while I'm living. And that's what we call metacognition. It's the ability to notice your thoughts and your patterns and your reactions instead of just getting swept up in them. And most people don't lose progress because they never cared about it. They lose it because they don't catch themselves in the moment. They only notice after the fact. When the conversation is over and the day is gone and they're already wondering why they acted like the old version again. And that's where the work starts, not with shame, but with awareness. So if you want to start building that muscle, your brain, right? Keep it simple. Once a day, pause and ask yourself these questions. What am I thinking right now? What am I feeling? What pattern am I in? And what would the version of me I'm becoming do next? Because that's how you build that skill of metacognition. It's not by trying to control everything, but it's just noticing sooner. So the more honest that you get with yourself in real time, the less power old patterns have over you. So the lesson here is that awareness gives you a chance to choose differently. Without awareness, you just keep repeating what's familiar. The thing that I'm learning is that becoming doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in the repeat. It happens when you keep showing up to the gym. It happens when you keep writing. It happens when you keep building, even though the progress feels slower than you want it to. It happens when you tell the truth about where you're at instead of pretending that you're further along than you actually are. That is what I want this journal to hold on to. Not fake confidence, not a perfect version of the story, but just the truth. Because the truth is that building something meaningful will expose what still needs work in you. It will expose your impatience. It will expose your insecurities. It will expose how badly you still want to control everything. And it will expose how easy it is to drift when nobody is watching you. But again, that exposure is not failure. That exposure is feedback. So if something in you gets exposed while you're building, do not run from it. Learn from it. That is often the exact thing that you need to deal with next. And that is where the real shift happens. Not when everything gets easier, but when you stop needing it to. So here's what I want you to take from everything that I've said today. It's not motivation, it's not a quote, but 3 things that connect directly back to everything that we have covered. And honestly, the whole series. So the first thing is identify the one environment that's pulling you back. This is the real world test of episode 3. But it only matters if you're willing to use it when the room tries to put the old version back on you. And as a coach, the first thing that I ask anyone who comes to me and says that they're feeling stuck isn't what do you need to do more of? It's what environment are you tolerating that keeps pulling you backward? Because most of the time, the answer is already there. You just haven't named it yet. So ask yourself, what room, relationship, habit, or environment makes me shrink into the older version of myself? Name it, and then take one action this week. Maybe that looks like setting a boundary. Maybe that looks like spending less time there, or change how you show up there and stop performing for acceptance. Because growth becomes real when your environment no longer controls your identity. The second thing is take one daily action that matches your future self. So this is the hammer from episode 2 applied to identity. Discipline is not just for the gym. It's for showing up as the person you said you're becoming. Every day, whether anyone is watching you or not. When I asked myself that question in the dark, when I was in that bad place, the first honest action was getting back in the gym for me. Not because it fixed everything, but because it was one real thing that matched the person I said I wanted to become. And that's how Warrior X started. It was one action that compounded into another and into another. So, with that said, every day this week, Do one thing the future version of you would respect. Maybe that looks like training when you don't feel like it. Maybe that looks like journaling honestly with yourself. Maybe following through on a commitment. Maybe you speak with confidence instead of shrinking. And build instead of escaping into distractions. Because identity is built through repeated actions, not motivation. And the last thing is, end every day with this mirror question. So this is where all three of the episodes converge, right? We have the struggle from week 1, the discipline from week 2, and the identity from week 3. This question holds all of it accountable every single night. And I've used this as a coach, and I've used it in my own life. It doesn't go away once things start working. It gets louder because the standard will rise within yourself. The forge is always on. It's just the question keeps the heat honest. So before bed every night for the next 7 days, I want you to ask yourself this question. Would the future version of me be proud of how I showed up today? Not perfect, not impressive, but just proud. And write the answer down 7 nights in a row, because that question will become your new standard. The same way it pulled me out of the drift and pointed me toward the build. So this is what I know right now. 4 episodes in, less than a year into Warrior X, and I'm still becoming. Building something real will ask more of you than you expected. It will cost more than you planned for. But it will also reveal more of who you are than comfort ever could. And that's why I'm keeping this podcast and blog as a journal for me, so I can remember the pressure, so I can remember the cost, so I can remember that the becoming was happening in real time, in the gyms, in the rooms, but mainly in the quiet moments when nobody was watching and I had to decide who I was. The forge shaped you, the hammer built you, the identity has given you direction. But none of that means anything if you keep walking into rooms and handing the old version of yourself back to people who knew you before your work started. Becoming costs something. It costs the comfort of fitting in places that you've outgrown. It costs the version of you that kept everyone around you comfortable. It costs the excuse that you're still figuring it out. Because at some point, you have it figured out. You just have to be willing to live like it. And one day when I look back at this episode, at this journal entry, at this exact moment in my build, I want to know that I said it honestly to you. That I didn't have it all figured out. But you know what? I showed up anyway. That I was becoming. And honestly, that's all any of us can do right now, is become anyway. So with all that said, let me ask you this. Who are you becoming right now? Based on what you're actually doing in your life. And are you willing to show up as that person even when it costs you something? And write it down and put it somewhere that you'll see it. And then go be that person today. Not when it's easy, not when the rooms that you're in make it comfortable, but today. Because the forge is still on, the hammer is in your hand, and you know what you're making. So keep becoming. And I'll see you guys next week. That's a wrap on today's episode. If this hit home for you, go read the companion post over on the MindForge blog at warriorxtraining.com. That's where it all starts. Every episode lives inside one of those posts. So if you want the full picture, that's where you go. Follow the show, share it with someone who needs it, and I'll see you back here next week. I'm Caden Floyd. Stay in the forge.